Welcome back to the LCC Leaders Forum. We're here to have a conversation with leading digital experts around innovation insights, the new way of connecting with consumers. So there's no doubt that since the pandemic hit, every industry has made leaps and bounds in digitalization, whether engagement, e-commerce, or recreating in-store experiences online. The luxury industry is no exception. So to look at some of these developments from the perspective of those leading from the front, we have with us here today Christina Karasolis. Christina leads the luxury brand partnerships for TikTok. She was previously head of luxury advertising for the Financial Times, as well as leading the commercial brand strategy for Vogue and GQ Australia. Rachel Waller, Global Vice President of Marketing, Digital and Innovation at Burberry. Rachel is responsible for all of the brand's own channels across social platforms, influencers, emails, messaging, and digital innovation. Very busy girl. Prior to this, Rachel led the brand and online communication at Farfetch. We also have with us Alison Bringé. Alison is the CMO of Launchmetrics, providing data analytics to help discover, activate, and measure the voices that matter for brands. Alison was previously Director of Marketing at Communication for IMG and looked after the PR for Net-a-Porter. We do have time for a couple of audience questions at the end, so do pop them in the chat box as they come to you. So let's first look at TikTok, a channel that has absolutely thrived over the lockdown period. It's been in the news non-stop with Trump's threats to ban the platform, hopefully less relevant now. Bids for partial ownership from Walmart and Oracle, and we're seeing TikTok videos form part of the news agenda owing to their vast viewing figures. For those less familiar, I'm going to give you a quick 20-second rundown of the TikTok basics, so then we can take a bit of a deeper dive with Christina. So, firstly, posts are called TikToks. TikToks, no. Posts are called, very different. Posts are called TikToks and are posted by creators. Once shared on your accounts, the algorithms are such that the more attention your TikTok post gets, i.e. being viewed for the full post rather than being flipped past, being liked, being shared, the more it'll appear on other users' For You feed, which is the equivalent of the Facebook news feed, and therefore will go viral. This means that it's easier to become a TikTok celebrity than, say, on Instagram, as it doesn't matter how many followers you have in the first instance. Now, much like Instagram, you can hashtag your content for people to search in themes. There's a whopping 3.5 billion views across the hashtag luxury. And always first to the party, the beauty and fashion industries have embraced TikTok. And for Fashion Week, a large number of major shows were streamed on hashtag TikTok Fashion Month, including Louis Vuitton, Prada, and Saint Laurent. So how are brands working with TikTok? Well, we can put out content on their own, or they can put out content on their own TikTok account. They can place ads which appear in users' feeds. And then there are these challenges, which is where it gets really interesting. Christina will tell us more. But firstly, it's important to establish who is it that's using TikTok. And Christina, why do you think that luxury brands are queuing up to get a piece of the action?
Well, it's a great question, and I hope everyone on this call is actually using TikTok as well. I know, Rosie, you mentioned that your husband was an early adopter as well on TikTok 2 years ago, I believe you mentioned. And I think we definitely have seen that growth on the platform in the past 6 months in itself. We have over 100 million monthly active users in Europe alone, which means that, we have had, and we will say that Generation Z and millennials were, of course, the early adopters on the channel and on the platform. But funnily enough, the fastest growing demographic that we're seeing now is 35 plus. And I think it goes to what you're saying, Rosie, around the idea that it is such an individual experience. So as you are curating on the feed, as you're engaging on TikTok, my experience on TikTok will be very different to everyone else's on this call. And that's because of the way that the algorithm works. And when I guess it comes to luxury brands and why they're on the platform and why they should be on the platform, I think it's such a unique and different audience, and it's such a really special community. And Generation Z, it's predicted that by 2035, there'll be 40% of luxury purchases in the market. So it's such an important audience to start to reach. But most importantly, it's a bridge for luxury brands to talk about their brand in a more nuanced, playful, relatable side. So it adds this area of democratization, I would say.
Yeah, it does seem TikTok's got a very unique tone. It seems to be all about creativity with these sort of raw one-take posts. It's fun, actually often quite tongue-in-cheek, rather than the sort of more polished content of Instagram. It's also spoken about as being very inclusive, a place for all, rather than a space where perhaps the more beautiful people thrive. But how can a luxury brand fit into that sort of more playful, tongue-in-cheek world?
You're absolutely right. I think there's certainly been a paradigm shift in the way that luxury brands are showing up on the platform. But most importantly, just in general, we've almost seen this transition. And I mean, we talk about 12 years, this era of luxury on demand that we've almost entered in. And in the past 12 years, we've seen this aesthetic of owning the most beautiful inside front cover in Vogue magazine, or having, an amazing immaculate shoot, to now, brands wanting to show a more flawed aesthetic. And that flawed aesthetic almost democratizes what their brand represents, and it becomes more relatable. And I think also we've seen this collapse of distance exclusivity in the luxury space, where now brands want to have a two-way conversation. And I was so excited that I was on the call with Rachel, because I know Burberry were one of the first brands on TikTok in May last year to actually go and start having that conversation with our audience. And for them, it was, their 100-year anniversary with Thomas Burberry. And they thought that they would do a hashtag challenge, which enabled people to, create their own TB, which launched a branded effect. And I think what that does is it allows people to talk about your brand in an organic way, but also start cultural trends. And I like to look at the creativity and how it becomes a universal language on TikTok. And I have some examples that I'd love to share with you guys if you have time. What I think, these are 3 examples that I think, and 3 great tips that will help brands embrace that creativity, I would say. So I will share my screen, and fingers crossed we have no issues with sound today. Here we go. So the first example I want to show is really how challenges work. And again, this notion of how creativity and this idea spreads. So there was a trend that, or a challenge that kind of went a bit viral. It was a voice clip of Adele singing. Someone had taken a voice clip of her singing. She passes the microphone out to the audience and they sing back to her. And they created this video right here. Never mind, I'll find someone like you. I wish nothing but the best for you. I mean, people have a lot of time on their hands. I love that. But what was amazing is as that started to pick up virality, brands started to then join in on that conversation. And we always say to luxury brands and just brands in general, the power that you have when you can start joining those trends. And this is an incredible response that Jacquemus did to this. Never mind, I'll find someone like you. I wish nothing but the best for you. Which is really, really clever. Another really great way for luxury brands embracing that creative side has been working with creators. And I think, we've seen this change of, it's no longer about having the hottest girl on Instagram that wears luxury clothing to be the person that is talking about your brand. It's about people also that have just become really popular on the platform by showing a really funny side. So this is probably the most handsome man on TikTok at the moment, Wisdom K, and Balmain did an amazing collaboration with him for their fashion show that was also live streamed on TikTok.
To waste your time. If the man broke, the man he a joke, so you gotta get loose with the Henny and the Coke.
I love that I was seeing Alison dance along to that one. And then the final way is, there's this idea of being refined on the platform too. And we never want to take away from a luxury brand and who they are, because at the end of the day, that is who they are. We're just saying change your messaging. And Dior did a phenomenal example of this. This is probably my favorite luxury example, because I think it just speaks to people on a human level. And that's what we always say. Sometimes it is just about breaking the fourth wall, having a direct conversation and not being afraid to make fun of yourself.
What am I saying it in a loving way or a sexy way or a question way? Do you believe in luck? Do you believe in luck? Do you believe in luck? Just believe. I believe in luck.
Should we start with the French ones or the English ones?
Oh, you know, not French. Joie. Again. Joie.
Joaillerie.
Dior joaillerie.
And the great thing about that example is it allows that conversation then. So Dior will say, well, how do you pronounce Dior joaillerie? And that's a really attractive way of then getting people to come on board and try and pronounce it in their own way. I mean, I can't speak French, and it's the one thing that I'm going to promise myself I'll do during lockdown.
Oh, well, good luck with that. You've only got a month, but crack on. Hopefully, you've only got a month. Well, yeah, I mean, I think to that point, it could be said that this sort of, more playful approach is potentially at odds with existing, the typical luxury brand's marketing strategy, perhaps who take the sort of control of their image much more seriously or too seriously even maybe. When you're speaking to luxury brands, Christina, how do you address these sort of concerns? And is there a way that luxury brands can dip their toe into the water as sort of a first step?
Absolutely. I think the conversation changes all the time depending on the client. There are some that are very quick to embrace the platform because for them, they want to have that organic conversation and they're not afraid to fail. Whilst others, of course, are very protective of their brand and they're worried about putting their image out there and saying, well, I don't want to be open to that scrutiny. I don't want to take away from that that side that makes my brand so wonderful, which is, the fact that it's built on heritage. But we always challenge them in the way that we say, a lot of your brands were built on this cultural aspect. They were challenges of the time, of the context of their time. Take Chanel, for instance, a brand that has, been doing the same thing for 100 years, which is why it's so iconic, I would say. But if you look at the birth of Chanel, Gabrielle Coco Chanel, who she was a person that was an innovator of her time. She almost challenged the status quo. So I always say, well, imagine if she were born today, what would she be doing? And the fact of the matter is she'd be creating TikToks because that is what our audience want. But I guess, the first step is others may just want to advertise on the platform. You don't need a TikTok account to be on TikTok. We always just say then, make it more native, be in premium positions, exactly the way that they tend to love it, which is, your, as we call it in print, the inside front cover. We have that same spot with a top view format on TikTok, which is very brand safe. It's the first ad upon entry. And that is your chance as a brand to be able to reach an exclusive audience and an audience that people love and want to connect with. So I guess that would be the first approach if they are nervous, that we have those options and there's not just a universal one way of doing it right on TikTok.
That sounds good, and we'll look forward to seeing your examples in a couple of months, and hopefully more luxury brands are embracing it. But Rachel, coming to you, as Christina mentioned, you guys are one of the first to embrace TikTok. You did your TB challenge. Nice to see the TB motif on your
yeah.
Well done. But not to sit still for long. Burberry have also worked this year with Twitch for Fashion Week and released a Snapchat mini program, which we're going to hear about today. Just before we get into that, it'd be great to hear how your strategy was amended or even pivoted, maybe as a result of suddenly finding yourself in the midst of a pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great question, right? I think for us, it's less that our strategy's probably shifted this year, and it's more that what would have been a sort of a 5-year strategy is now a sort of 18-month strategy, if not a 12-month strategy. So it's just been that drastic acceleration. And I think, that's definitely challenging. It's obviously hugely challenging for stores, but it also provides a lot of really great opportunity around things that we're thinking about. And I think for me personally, it's a really interesting opportunity now to look at what that means where, our digital selves and our physical selves are blending more and what that means in terms of your relationship with the brand. So it really has just been an extreme acceleration, I think.
Yeah, challenging is the word, stressful might be another word. Let's chat about Burberry's Spring Summer 2021 show. Why was it that Twitch was selected to showcase the collection? I mean, it is known as a place for gamers. So, I mean, could even be said to have the perception of, you know, a place where teenage boys are hanging out in their bedrooms. How was it selected?
Yeah, I mean, we were really, really excited about Twitch, and I think the way it came about was it was a three-pronged sort of thinking process. I think first and foremost, we're really, really interested at Burberry about connecting to our consumers' passion points. I think it becomes increasingly important, and Christina touched on it, of, you know, not just us broadcasting out to the consumer, but actually finding the spaces where they want to connect and talk to them around the things they want to talk about. And we know that gaming is a huge passion point for our sort of Gen Z luxury consumer. So we'd already made that connection from the passion point perspective. We then looked at the platform itself, and Twitch actually is really interesting because, exactly to your point, you kind of imagine it's sort of young boys, but actually more than 50% of the audience are in their 20s. You have a fairly even split. It skews slightly more male, but it still has a fairly even male-female split. And you actually, if you look at the audience breakdown, they are likely to buy into brands who share in the community space. So it's a really, really interesting platform dynamic. So we knew it was the passion point for our consumer. We knew the consumer that our brand needed to connect with was on that platform. And then the final prong was really understanding what Riccardo wanted to achieve creatively with the show and what we could then do with the platform. So Twitch allows you, in a sort of slightly unconventional way, on Twitch, they have a format called Squad Stream, which is basically where, in the same way that we're laid out here, if four of us wanted to stream our gaming, for sake of argument, together, we could drop in together, and you as a user could watch the four of us gaming together. And so actually we thought, you know, what could you do creatively with a format like this that you couldn't maybe do on other platforms? And Riccardo had this idea of, because no one could be physically at the show, how could you let them control their narrative of how they could move around the space as if they were there physically? And so actually what we ended up doing was we used this sort of Twitch squad functionality and married it with Riccardo's creative. So you could actually turn and pick which angle of the creative you experience. So it was kind of those three things, which was quite interesting for us. It was the passion point, who was on the platform, and then what we could do with it creatively.
And it seems that it went incredibly well for you, that show. I mean, the buzz, the hype, the media coverage was unbelievable.
Oh, thank you. We were very pleased.
Yeah, absolutely. Alison, coming to you. Launchmetrics have sat at the heart of the digitalization of Fashion Week, actually building the platform for Paris Haute Couture and Men's Fashion Week. So bringing the event to the buyers, the media, consumers. We can see that brands being more experiential and, well, sorry, I should say experimental, actually. They are being experiential as well. But they're being experimental with the channels they're using. They're reaching new audiences. From Alison, from having this sort of bird's eye view that you have you been able to see a winning formula for what a sort of successful mid-pandemic Fashion Week contribution might look like?
Yeah, sure. I thought it would also be good to kind of talk about the evolution of what we saw. And everyone loves data. So I thought, you know, why not first thing in the morning share some exciting, yeah, some really fun geeky data. So there we go. So this is kind of interesting to look at. This is a study we did across print, online, social, looking at the 5 voices that kind of impact the customer journey. And we wanted to understand in that first phase of the lockdown what really, really happened, because in the end, we felt like it influenced a lot of what we've been seeing now. You know, that first phase, if you guys remember, everyone was like, okay, in June, everything's gonna go back to normal. We're gonna be back at work. Like, let's just hold marketing budgets till then, etc. And it was quite interesting because basically these are year-on-year numbers. So if we compare 2020 to 2019, we can see online media was up 64%. Where social and print were down. I'm sure actually TikTok numbers, I would assume, were quite up. But overall, when we look at, you know, how brands were creating media impact, and what's quite interesting about this is that a year ago you would have said that traditional media was kind of dying and it was all about social or even like the voice of the influencers. But really we found that the first phase of the lockdown, people were kind of so scared and wanted to know what was going on. So they were turning to more established voices to kind of get their information or to be comforted or to see what those people are doing. So, you know, funny enough, celebrities actually outranked what influencers were doing, and media outranked what all the other voices were doing. So that was kind of crazy. But then as you started to see, once people realized you weren't coming out of the lockdown, they started, as you said, to embrace this kind of digital concept. Okay, we can't leave our houses. Our customers really aren't going out to stores. What's next? And that's where we started to see all this very relatable content coming out. So I think, you know, it would be interesting to compare with specific TikTok data to see like when challenges went through the roof. We also started to see all of these brands like, I don't know, Gucci that turned to doing cooking classes, or Cezanne, who was doing a lot of really kind of at-home yoga sessions, or health, mind, well-being type programs through their various social media channels. And then of course, as you mentioned, you know, at Launchmetrics, we partnered up with Paris Fashion Week to help them digitize their Fashion Week experience for haute couture. And then of course, in September for the women's shows. So, you know, I think everybody was hoping by June things would get back to normal, and they were kind of waiting it out to see, you know, what their physical events or physical activities would look like. And then at some point, everyone realized, okay, this isn't happening. So we need to think about, you know, how we digitize this experience, how we continue that brand building. I think that's a key word here, because when sales go down, executives usually turn to that concept of pushing product. And at the end, what really won, and the influencers that did do well, the brands whose owned media channels actually did flourish in that second phase right after that strict lockdown, it was those that focused on brand building activities and less about product. And that's why these digital fashion weeks ended up working so well. And I have some stuff to share later in our chat about one brand in particular who did super well through this kind of concept of physical and digital. But yeah, it was really interesting to see, you know, how all this came to life after such a strict quarantine and lockdown process.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you mentioned, I mean, evaluation was more vital than ever because budget purse strings are tightening. Equally, you know, all these new experimental activations need to be benchmarked, whether it's by the competitor, by the, you know, but by their last year's performance, etc. Your brand performance metrics are now, you know, well used within the fashion industry, and most people are very familiar with them. But just in case anyone's not, do you mind just sharing how these are measured quickly?
Yeah, of course. Well, in the world of TikTok or Vogue or Instagram or WeChat or Weibo, you know, it's so hard for brands today to understand how they're performing holistically. I mean, I guess, Rachel, you say in a worldwide capacity. So of course you want to know how your brand is performing in the UK, but maybe also you need to compare, you know, what you're spending in the UK and what you're getting with what's happening in China or what's happening in the US. And to do that at Launchmetrics, we believe that brands need one currency. And so our currency, as you mentioned, Rosie, is called media impact value. And media impact value assigns a monetary amount, whether it's pound, euro, USD, to every post, interaction, or article. And that allows you to measure all of these different voices. So whether it's looking at, you know, the celebrity voice, whether it's looking at media, influencers, partners, or owned media, because we believe that all of these different voices are quite key in that customer journey, from creating awareness with celebrities and media to conversion through influencers, and then even, let's say, owned media through retention. I mean, who better to buy a Rolex than someone who already owns a Rolex? So it's quite nice, because I think till now the challenge has been that marketing teams have been looking at owned, earned, and paid, or print, online, and social. And all of those metrics are so different that until now, you haven't been able to understand really what's working and what's not, because you can't compare engagement with likes, with readership, with circulation. So we've kind of presented this one-stop solution through our media impact value algorithm.
No, it makes such sense, and it, yeah, you can see why the fashion industry and beauty industry have really embraced this. But looking at, again, going back to your sort of bird's eye view of the industry that you have you seen any fashion week or actually just general campaigns have any surprising results over the last sort of 6 to 8 months?
Yeah, I guess as I was saying too, like once we came out of this quarantine and we realized that everything was going to have to be a bit digital, the challenge that brands then were faced with, and actually I think Ricardo had a really great thought process with this create your own journey, because if you weren't going to have people physically coming to your event in some capacity, how were you going to create that amplification? How were you going to create buzz and engagement? And I just don't mean kind of, on social media. And that's where I think the brands that did it right during Fashion Week were really, really successful. So, right, normally you have 1,000 people or 1,500 people coming to your fashion show if you're a bigger brand, maybe 500 if you're a smaller brand. And those people actually are little content creators for you, right? Like even if it's Susie Menkes, who you don't think of as an influencer, she's still sitting in the front row, taking Instagram posts and sometimes writing stories. And what that does is it creates a lot of noise and buzz for your brand. So if you don't have people physically coming to your show, how are you going to do that? You can't kind of hope that people post about watching a live stream. You have to actually make that part of your strategy. And so this season in September, when we monitored, typically Launchmetrics monitors about 400 shows during New York, London, Paris, and Milan. And during that time, we looked at, all of these shows that were doing physical activities, some that were doing digital, trying to understand, who had the best strategy. And what we found in the end, it was that kind of phygital strategy where brands actually pre-thought about amplification that was very, very successful. So Dior, they are kind of one of the leaders of the pack when it comes to their own social media strategy, which is what you see here on my screen, owned media. They usually do really well in general. But this year, because of this kind of you're not here, but I'm thinking about my amplification plan, they were able to garner 25% more media impact value. And this was actually their #1 post during Paris Fashion Week. And it garnered 615,000 in media impact value, which was actually twice as valuable as their most significant post last season. So that's kind of incredible, because if you think about holistically the different fashion weeks, because they went to digital and because there were no physical audiences, they did kind of lose that momentum, or they lost some media impact value. But because of this kind of phygital plan that Dior put in place, they were able to garner, as I said, 25% more media impact value. And there were a few other French brands that also increased in value because they had this great kind of amplification strategy. I just want to say one more thing that I thought was super, super interesting when we looked at the data as well, was that a lot of these brands that were performing well, that did this kind of amplification program using their own media, they actually posted less. And those posts though had more value. As I said, this post was 2 times as valuable as the post that ranked #1 last season. So I think, not only were brands thinking about creating this digital experience, amplifying those kind of content and digital assets, but how they could do it without like clogging the market and over communicating. And really that was kind of a home run. So I'm excited to see, I'm sure everyone will say this throughout the day, but we've seen years of digital transformation in just months. I mean, the Paris Fashion Week platform we built at Launchmetrics in under a month. And typically if we asked our developers to do that, they would kill us, but it is the time. So I'm excited to see actually with the next quarantine, how we're going to continue to evolve and create digital experiences for our consumers.
Gosh, well, we're absolutely very excited to see. And thank you so much for those brilliant examples. Rachel, coming to you, another example sort of on and offline blending, I suppose, is the Burberry new store in Shenzhen. It could be said that April 2020 seemed a bit of an imperfect time to open a store in any market, let alone China. But why was it Shenzhen was chosen for this? And can you tell us a little bit about the objectives around the store and then how it came to life?
Of course. So Shenzhen, for anyone who doesn't know, the city is in sort of the south of China. It's it's, I guess the simplest way to, the shortcut in terms of understanding the city is it's basically sort of the Silicon Valley of China. It's the home of Tencent and Huawei, so it has this bustling tech scene in the city. It's also, as you would imagine with a big tech city, very young, very affluent. So you have this very, very unique kind of customer base in the city. You also have, like I said, Tencent is based in the city. So when we looked at this project, we kind of had an idea in terms of we're very much into sort of test and learn with our stores. And we had this idea that we wanted to have as sort of our blueprint of what a social first store could look like. So doing it in a city that's sort of the home of Tencent felt like absolutely the right thing to do. And so what we did is we partnered with Tencent, who own WeChat, which is sort of, I'm sure you all know very well, but is obviously one of the biggest apps in China. And the idea was that we wanted to work out, what a social retail experience could be. We know from consumer insights the consumer is inspired on social. In luxury, they still tend to, as I'm sure everyone on the call will know, tend to go in store for the purchase, and then they come back online after the purchase. So that's a sort of a well-known consumer journey for us, but not necessarily one that we're making seamless for the consumer at the moment. In China, there's a unique opportunity in that WeChat allows you, through things like WeChat mini programs, WeChat payments, you sort of have these end-to-end apps that exist within WeChat itself. So you have a very, very unique opportunity to actually try and connect that online inspiration and that physical in-store experience quite seamlessly by using WeChat. So what we did is we worked very closely with Tencent. The store in itself is incredibly experiential. It's beautiful. It has interactive windows. It has a cafe. It's incredibly experiential in itself. But I guess what's particularly interesting about it is that it's all powered through social interactions. So before you get to the store, you can access the Shenzhen Bay mini program from Burberry. You can explore all the spaces in the store on your phone. You can book yourself into a cafe experience. You could reserve your own fitting room. Each of the fitting rooms is kind of wildly different. You can be in one that's full of mirrors or one that's laid out like sort of a deer. So you can reserve all of that in advance. You can be guided around the store by one of our Burberry ambassadors in the region. So you can do all of this before you get to the store. You can also connect with a sales associate. So before I even get to the store, I know who my person is going to be when I get there. We can chat within my existing WeChat app. So it's all this sort of seamless build to getting to the store. Then when you get to the store, you can basically personalize and enrich your store experience by using that mini program as a companion the whole way through. So when you arrive at the store, there's an interactive window. You can scan a QR code, and that window will then personalize itself to your body. You can go through the store and scan QR codes on products and learn more about the products, favorite them, like them, share them in the same way that you would if you were engaging normally on social. And you can kind of the whole way through the experience, it will tailor to you as the more you use your phone. So that in itself is really interesting for us because it allows us to do two really important things, which again are very unique to China. One, it allows us to sort of build this social CRM profile. So, we talk a lot about CRM in luxury and how important it is, but it's very difficult to marry that with social. But in China, you can obviously start to build the social CRM profile. And then the really interesting thing for me is that it then allows us to start to reward you for that social engagement with a concept that we're calling social currency. So the idea is the more that you engage with the brand, the more we begin to reward you and unlock experiences for you. And I think that's where it starts to get really, really interesting. If not only are you connecting your social and your physical self in the store, but we're then rewarding and engaging you for those social interactions. So it really starts to build a value exchange between the brand and the consumer. That is probably a very long description of what that store does, but it's very, very exciting for us.
I think that's actually just the tip of the iceberg of what that store does in reality.
Yes.
It's an incredibly comprehensive activity. It's unbelievable. And obviously this sort of gaming side of things works very well in China, as we know, that market is very engaged with that. But do you think that'll then be rolled out? And actually, generally, do you think gaming will become a bigger part in what Burberry do next? And then actually lead on to that, what else is next for the brand?
Yeah, so I think gaming is super interesting, right? We've talked a lot about Gen Z consumers. It's a space that they're already playing in heavily. It's already mainstream, right? So I think gaming is definitely a space we're going to continue to play in. We've recently announced that we're doing an Honor of Kings partnership in early 2021. And for anyone who is I'm also not a big gamer, but I guess I should be. Honor of Kings is the biggest game in China at the moment. So we've got a partnership with them coming early next year. And I think we will continue to engage with this community. It might be in-game, it might be on the platforms like we've done with Twitch, it might be with the teams who are playing in the space. Louis Vuitton has just done an amazing collaboration with with awards and engaging teams. So I think there's a real opportunity for luxury to work out who the influencers are in this space. So definitely something we're interested in. I think in terms of what's next, I mean, I think for us, it's just about being really dynamic. I guess for all of us in luxury, we don't know what the next few months will hold. So I think it's, there are some principles that will remain really strong for us. We want to continue to engage our community. We want to build an emotional connection. We want to talk to people in the spaces where they're going to be. Experiences as we know them are going to be significantly different for the next few months. So what does that mean in terms of how we engage and inspire you? But in terms of the spaces that we'll play, I think we just need to be really, really dynamic. And I'm kind of excited by that. As you mentioned earlier, I grew up at Farfetch after the sort of financial crisis. So, I think that resilience and that agility is what we're going to try and focus on for the next few months.
Oh, well, a huge congratulations on the Shenzhen store. Very innovative activity, and everyone's talking about it. So well done. Alison, just a bit of future gazing, looking to the future. What's next for Launchmetrics? Will you be encompassing some of these latest channels, such as TikTok, into the offering, for example?
Yeah, so not to let the cat out of the bag, but if you're a journalist, don't tell anyone. we have already actually started
business watching then.
No, we have already started incorporating TikTok into the programs we've been doing for our French brands over last Fashion Week, and we will be rolling it out into our tools in the next few weeks. And confidentially, we have some big China news coming out that will reflect 10 new Chinese networks. So stay tuned for that. But yeah, it's an exciting time. I feel bad. It's really sad, with everything happening, and it's been quite a hard year, especially here in the UK for a lot of brands. But I would say, being a technology provider, everyone wants to digitize their processes. And on top of that, I think consolidation too. A lot of senior management, Rachel, you probably could speak to this better, but at brands are saying, okay, we have so many vendors, we work with so many different tools, like what do we actually need? And the fact that at Launchmetrics we do so many things, whether it's working with, like procurement and PR for sample management, or the media teams for media monitoring, social teams, influencers, that I think, some of the CMOs that we work with have just said, okay, how do we scale back and consolidate so we don't have to work with 30 people because we need to reduce costs. And fortunately and unfortunately, we're in a position to help brands with that right now. So it's a busy time, an exciting time, even though it's personally a tough time, I think, for a lot of us.
Yeah, absolutely. And same question to you, Christina. What's next for TikTok? E-commerce, perhaps?
Absolutely. So I think refining what our product offering is. We grew so quickly and so fast, and for us it was just about onboarding as many people and creative people in all the different regions. So I think it is just about, again, growing and growing and growing. And part of that is what the product sphere looks like. So improving our targeting, for instance, e-commerce is definitely something that we are in alpha stages testing at the moment, looking at how sampling can work on the platform, but also working down that entire marketing funnel. And I think just keeping on building the community as well, because that is such a big part of what makes TikTok so amazing. So working with incredible creators, onboarding new talent, and just seeing where that journey takes us. It's full steam ahead, as they say.
World domination, essentially.
Exactly right.
Perfect. Right, we have had a couple of questions from the audience. So let's just see. Okay, so a few of them are for Alison, and yeah, okay, so I can combine a couple of these. Alison, we've used your tools for events over the years. Are Launchmetrics now converting these events for online tools for online events?
Yeah, actually, that was thank you to whoever asked that question. I'm a terrible CMO, didn't even mention that. That was actually one of our big releases so that our brands could have a digital solution this past September. So that was quite exciting. We launched not only the kind of virtual event functionality through the normal event system, so you could have both your physical and digital event, but we also launched a digital showroom tool so that I'm a journalist or I'm a buyer, I've come to your event and now I want to kind of experience all of that over again, or just I'm a brand and I need to amplify those assets to the voices that matter. So we built an integrated kind of virtual showroom as well. So that's been quite successful, and thanks to whoever asked that question.
Yeah, a couple of people actually. And one for Rachel. How important is it for Burberry to be the first to do things?
Well, that's a good question. I think that that's definitely been a sort of a big driver for a lot of things we've done previously. But I guess if you get down to it, Burberry is, has traditionally, and when I say traditionally, I mean over the last 100 years, Burberry is a brand of explorers, right? We dressed Shackleton over 100 years ago. So actually it's very much it's not actually a new thing for us. It's like very much in our DNA to sort of push the boundaries and innovate and try new things. So I think it definitely predates me, and I think if we can go all the way back there to 100 years, I think it's just part of the DNA of the brand. And I think it's also important now more than ever. It's a crowded space. So what are the things that you do to sort of cut through the noise? I think that's an important driver for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you should take some more credit though, Rachel. For me. Oh, well, perfect. And we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much to everybody. We will definitely be keeping a close eye on all of your companies at the rate you're innovating. So thank you so much to Christina, Rachel, and Alison. We are going to take a quick coffee break and reconvene at 10:30 when we'll focus on the world of hospitality, a world that's been dismantled over the last 8 months, but has the prospects to be rebuilt into something even better. The link is in your schedule shared yesterday. It's also been emailed to you an hour ago and also found here on the microsite. So we'll see you shortly. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.